Hi there. Apologies for the lack of content over the last few weeks. In the Black Friday melee and then the beginning of December, it's just been crazy, crazy busy. So I thought it might be interesting to have a look at the latest demo that I've written for Spitfire. It's kind of similar to the choir in the sense that I worked it out partly kind of at the keyboard, partly just sketching up chords and ideas and things. But basically I did a similar thing in that I kind of smashed through a rough piano and then assembled everything kind of from there, just kind of orchestrating on the go. So I think this kind of fits in with a request which I've had from a few people now, which is to look at some CC stuff in more detail and some of the kind of broken down orchestration, MIDI orchestration, how I do it, which is slightly different from how some people do it. I know that some people love using their key switches or the UAC or things like that, and just trying to keep everything on as few tracks as possible. Personally, I just like to kind of break it all out because I just find it easier to visually see what's going on in the different sections of the instrument. So which bits are playing staccato. I can quickly and easily see at what point certain instruments are lined up together and things like that. And in lieu of actually sitting with a manuscript paper and seeing it visually, this kind of works best for me. So let's jump straight in. I'm going to pop my headphones on so that I can speak over the music without making an unholy mess in Pro Tools. And you'll notice that I've frozen a lot of this. This is because I've got ScreenFlow and Pro Tools running on the same computer. And it would probably work okay, but I just thought safety first. And I'll just, at least I know this will definitely work. So the first thing is to have a look at the piano. I always do this. It looks terrible. I don't make any effort to kind of to try and kind of enharmonic it to make it kind of logical. I just rely on my sight reading to just kind of work it out. But this is what I use once I've done the piano track to kind of do my orchestration on the go. So let's have a listen to the piano track first, and then we can start diving in. You'll notice that once I put the piano track in, I added some really, really rough kind of tempo things, and again it's mostly quite blocky. I didn't really go into a huge amount of time and detail on the tempo changes, but have a listen. I had a little bit here which I cut. Okay, so let's have listen through first of all to the finished thing, and then we'll go in and start breaking it down. Okay, so a quick blast through. Right, the first thing is just to tell you what I'm using. So all of these are from Studio Brass Pro. The mics that I'm using, I've just kind of gone for a quick balance. I haven't gone in and kind of done a load of tweaking. This was kind of a one-day thing. It was just basically like, right, I've carved out this day to write this demo. So I whacked up to start with just the close 1 and 2, which are the two different kind of flavors of close. And on the sections, obviously it gives you a different feel because one of them is closer to the leader. Tree 1, and then the outriggers. Always like the outriggers added to the tree because it gives you that extra width. I probably would have at some point gone in and started tweaking the mics, but actually once I got going, it sounded good, so I just kind of left it. So I duplicated that across the entire rest of the track. So looking at the strings here, this is Studio Strings Pro. Again, I'll just open up a track, show you. Yeah, so again, same mics I'm using, just whack those up. And all the way through the string section, exactly the same. When you get down to, I'm not using any Divisi. For the woodwinds, I used Studio Woodwinds. With this one, I could only use the tree mic because although it's complete, it's still going through a lot of testing, and the build that I have only has the tree mic in it. So I couldn't use the kind of full fat version of the woodwinds, but they're kind of just doing colors and those really vital bits down the bottom where you've got the bassoons and the contrabassoons that really help you to kind of punch out the bottom end. And even though you can't necessarily hear them distinctly, they add weight and they add fatness to the actual sound. So that's really important. And then at the top end, I was just using these just rips and staccatos, and there's an oboe legato, little oboe legato solo in a couple of places that you can hear. So other stuff we've got going on here, we've got these toms from the Headley Grange library, the Grange, and that's Roger Taylor from Queen. It's his toms, him playing his toms. I've used a little bit of Chad Smith's hi-hat from the same library. Got a bit of Albion 1 stuff in here. I've got more of a clicky electronic thing going on here from the Bernard Herrmann Composer Toolkit. We've got some Hans Zimmer percussion going on here, bass drum, timps. I've called these toms, but I've actually used some of the bombos and surdos going on in there. Let's just rebalance that. And then harp stuff. So let's just have a quick look at this. So you'll see that I've got a couple of different harp sweeps up and down. And what I've done is, if I just show you that, I have done the pedaling to match the scale of what I'm trying to do in the piece, and then just use the white notes to do a kind of, to make it feel good, like a kind of sweep. And I've done that slightly differently for each of these harp sections for each of those runs. Final stuff is a few bits from Spitfire Percussion, xylophone, vibes, marimba, celeste, and the cymbals. So if you want to hear what that percussion is doing, first of all, let's have a quick listen to that. So the opening run. So that's a mixture of different things. And if we look at the brass on its own, so really straightforward. And I've just used da-da-dum in the trumpets and then just a little stab on the rest of the stuff. So I've left those kind of real scattery stuff to the strings and the woodwinds. And strings on their own sound like this. Now again, the two elements here that are doing the run up at the beginning are two run patches on the violin ones and the cellos, and that's really all you need. You just need something going up, and in context, once you've got everything going, you just want that kind of, it just needs to be a kind of a smear. It doesn't really want to be too precise. You want to have it a little bit blurred around the edges. And then if we add the woodwinds to that, we get... So if we put the trumpet and horn back in and just add those to here. The way that I like to hear that sound, the way that I think it sounds most successful, is when things are slightly different. So I don't want everybody trying to do the same thing. I want people's timings to be different. the notes they're playing to be slightly different at different moments, so that they're all aiming for a certain point, but they're doing it differently. And I think that's what gives you the kind of most successful thing. And then if you look at the kind of impact moment, and then strings on their own for these impact sections. Right, so you can see within the MIDI data here that I'm not redlining everything. I'm really kind of giving a very strong accent to the impact moments that I want to poke out. Like with a real orchestra, the individual elements, so just the strings on their own, are not going to sound like the Thor's hammer coming in to kind of smash the building to pieces. But when you add all of these things together, that's when you get the impact, and that's what makes it sound, I think, more realistic. Is having those individual elements sound realistic, and then relying on your arrangement to actually provide the impact. So if we just unsolo these again and just listen to the whole thing. What about some of these faster trumpet sections up here? Okay, so that's in context. You can see that I'm using a staccato trumpet patch to do a run. It sounds great to my ears, so I don't see anything particularly wrong with that. It's all about, if it sounds good, it is good. Here again with these high bits, you can see that I'm careful about the way that I'm playing things in, and sometimes tweaking the velocity data to make sure that stuff is kind of moving in the right direction when the volume is supposed to be increasing, but not like totally the same. So my top trumpet part here is getting a tiny bit more excited than the underneath part, who's being a little bit more restrained, and things like that. Just mixing all of that stuff up. Over here, if you look at the trumpets, again, they're not all redlining. In fact, the first time I played it in, they were a little bit redliney, and so I went back in and just tweaked that just to kind of break it up a bit. And if you listen to those on their own, and there are two alternative ways of doing that. You can do that using these staccato patches, or you can do that using the multi-tongue patches as well, which I could have done, but again, I was just playing it in and really not trying to kind of go with the immediate vibe and not trying to overthink it or spend too long on it. What about these slow sections at the end? So we've got the brass on their own here. Okay, so what's going on in here? Now you can see that there's a certain amount of modulation data, and I'm staying really down in the bottom half of the range. So I want to just tickle that middle part of the instrument where the instrument starts to open up, but I'm really trying to keep it so that it's mostly in the very, very soft, quiet area, and that's the same. So if we look at these guys, you'll see that the modulation on the contrabass bones is much higher than on the other two, but let's have a quick listen. So you get the idea, really shaping it, and with the tenors and basses, which are very excitable when you get to the top of that range because of the lip bleed FFF sessions, really just only allowing them to just open up a tiny bit, with the horns as well. So you can hear that they're blending and they're arranged in a way that gives you quite a close voicing, which I think is always the most successful way to arrange for these kind of brass choral type of sounds. It's slightly different when we get to the end. Let's have a quick look at the very end section here. So you see here we've got the tuba and the contrabass bones spaced nicely apart. The basses and tenors are quite tightly packed again, and I'm using the legato patches to give me a very, very smooth line here. And the horn legato is just doubling the top tenor bone part. A couple of other things that I've done for specific effects is round about here. So I'm using the woodwind percussively here. If we just go into these staccato parts, you can see that they're just giving you that kind of metronomic sort of feel. Doubling the strings at this stage. The strings are playing a slightly more varied section, doing little melodic things as well, not quite so metronomic, while the brass are playing cross rhythms here and the horns, and that gives you quite a nice effect as well. Balance-wise in this section, I've tried to make sure that the brass, especially the trumpets when they're playing this high in their range, are really just overpowering everything else in the track. If we have a look at the moments where I've used the Celeste, I've been quite sparing, as you can see, with my percussion, my tuned percussion, I should say, just to make sure that when they're playing, they're adding a sparkle and giving a contrast. So moments like that on the Celeste are like this. So here that nice kind of sprinkle down. Here, the following the melody and then just lifting off towards the end, a little arpeggio. There, adding a bit of decoration and colour, and it's just that thing that doesn't have to be super loud. It's just that thing that just brightens it up, and you hear the bells in the background, and it just kind of gives it that celebratory feel. The xylophone is doing some different things. If I highlight these, you can see that at one point I've actually, let's look at that. So here I've copied the part from the violin twos and then adjusted it in situ, and it sounds like this. So getting it to double the lower part of that violin runner up. Other places I've used it. So they're articulating those kind of quite jagged lines. Those kind of things work really well, doing doubling up those brass rhythms. And here it's just doing the metronome thing. So it's playing along with the woodwind in just literally just counting off that beat. So I think that's probably most of it. My timps, you can see, lead with my right hand. So here you can see these sections where I've kind of gone da-da-dum. Those very kind of characteristic things that you would get with a real player with two sticks. But you can see that there's not a huge amount of melodic material. It's mostly kind of punching through things and trying not to be too tricksy and too clever, because A, it kind of blurs into an unpleasant mess if you do that, and B, it just doesn't sound real, because even in the kind of most dense session, you'd have kind of 4 or 5 timps. You wouldn't generally have more than that, and so your poor player has got to retune, and it just starts to sound hokey and unreal, if I find, if you put too much material in there. So I think that's pretty much it. I think I've explained most of the kind of ideas that I've used. As I said, I'll break it out so that I can see really clearly who's doing what at any one time. I personally find that if I have one line for horn 2 and I'm using program changes or other kind of CC information to change the articulation that I'm using, the sound that I'm using, then it's just too difficult for me. I mean, it's probably fine if I was going to write this out on score paper and then key it in, that would probably be fine because I've got the score paper to refer to. But on this kind of thing where I'm starting with a quick piano sketch and then just working my way through, doing it in one session, it just becomes too complicated to see what's going on at any one time. So keep commenting, keep leaving me your ideas, the things that you want to see. I can go into more detail on certain things if that's of interest. And I've got more stuff coming. I've got some ideas in progress for after the holiday season. So hope you all have a fantastic holiday and look forward to seeing you on the other side. Bye-bye.